For the last 10 years, with the help of Jakub Novak from the Czech Republic, Michael Maxwell from Canada, and also Hans Lingren from Australia, I've been able to create DNS Strength Training, which is a 3-course, 9-day track that takes the principles of movement laid out by Pavel Kolar that we teach in DNS and applies it to strength training. Now, these classes are designed to get coaches and therapists that work with athletes in the weight room to be able to maximize their results and minimize their risk of injury. Now, 2 people that were critical to this process are Drew and Chelsea Dillon. Drew and Chelsea were originally national level Olympic weightlifters here in the United States who now became coaches, and they're starting to deploy these DNS principles with their athletes in their gym, Project Lift, right here in Columbus, Ohio. And Drew and Chelsea have been here since the very beginning. It was on them that I was able to test out these principles of movement very, very early on and work with them through the full arc of their careers and really test out and learn how to refine how you're supposed to apply these principles to strength training. So they now have a gym where they're using these principles. They were there in the beginning. And so in this conversation, I wanted to kind of document the full arc of the development of the DNS strength training model from its very beginnings to what it is now, which is that 3-course certification track, the end of which you can become a certified DNS strength coach. So in this conversation, we talk about the full evolution of DNS strength training. We talk about it from the perspective as an athlete getting treated. We talk about it from the using it in the coaching world. And we even discuss, going through their careers where we had to use DNS not only to maximize their performance in certain cases, but also rehab them through near career-ending injuries. So you have to pay attention to that one. And then finally, we talk about some of the troubles and the difficulties of applying these principles of movement to elite strength training. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation with 2 of my dear friends, Drew and Chelsea Dillon, so that you maybe will learn more about DNS strength training and then also maybe find out that this is the exact track that you need to get the better performance out of your athletes and to minimize their risk of injury.
All right. Well, cool. Well, thank you guys for coming on. This has been many, many years. What are we?
Almost 15.
2011 is when we first met. But I wanted to bring you guys on to kind of document DNS strength training. So I just finished all 3 of them, 1, 2, and 3. Finished it, signed and sealed, and sent out in December. And since you guys have been such an intimate part of the whole process from before I was even a DNS instructor all the way into now becoming certified DNS strength coaches, and we're honestly just sort of like the testing ground on which I was able to sort of build this thing. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without you guys, and you've become close friends since that time. And so I thought it was appropriate to have you guys on to just sort of talk about essentially the evolution of DNS strength training. And then you guys are probably the best expression of how that has been applied to strength training, certainly in the weightlifting world, the Olympic weightlifting world. And so here we are.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's been fun watching the journey.
You guys have gotten front row seats because we did a little bit of a timeline here. So we all met in 2011. Now I didn't know that there was a strength training course in the works. I didn't even know I was going to be an instructor. But the first time I took a DNS class, I think was 2009. And that was, you guys have both met Alana Kobasova, and she was teaching this, and she went through and was just explaining how you stabilize, so intra-abdominal pressure on the diaphragm. And right after that lecture, I had a heavy snatch workout, and we were in a little gym facility, and I immediately started just sort of trying to sort of apply it to the most complex, difficult movement you could possibly apply it to. But then right there, instead of seeing DNS like a rehab approach, I saw it as an explanation of movement and how to actually brace and move and stuff. And I was like, we have to apply this to weightlifting. Okay, well then 2 years later, I open up Columbus Chiropractic and Rehabilitation in June, and in the fall, I was like, oh my gosh, the Olympic weightlifting, Olympic trials are going to be here. So then I kind of hopped on. I was like, I want to build the business. I want to work with Olympic weightlifters like you guys. And I found Mark Canella's number. I called Mark Canella, and he's like, well, why don't you just come out to the gym? And so then we went out to the YMCA in Worthington, was it? Columbus-ish.
Carl Road.
Columbus-ish.
Yeah, so I went out to this, you guys, you had this one row of platforms along the wall. And Chelsea, you hadn't moved down yet, but you were there. And Drew, you were there. And I just sort of like came and met the team. And that was kind of where it all started.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that. I mean, the passion that you had, and, because docs would come in and, like, oh, I'm a doc, and you came in and it was like,
come get adjusted.
You were like, yeah, I'm a doc, but like, let's weightlifting. And I was like, no, this dude like really likes weightlifting.
He does. Well, it's funny because the first thing that Mark, is like this really great, has a really great eye for lifting. And there was this thing that you were doing that I didn't realize it till we were sort of talking about this podcast. That thing actually led later on. We'll get to that. But he is, he's really good with technique. He's got an amazing eye, and he just kept noticing your right foot when you would catch this really ballistic movement. You're underneath the bar, and your right foot would turn out, and it was driving him crazy. And he's like, "Why is that happening? Go figure that out." And then, I went through and was sort of like looking at stuff like, well, why is this turning out? We were doing some like just simple DNS tests like between the benches and stuff to figure out that right hip isn't quite as stable as the other one. And so it was sort of like when you ask it to move quickly, which I didn't even know what functional capacity was at that time, that was a speed threshold. You were exceeding your speed threshold there. And then when you have to move really quick, and you get under heavy load, that hip defaults to, it turns out and has to compensate there, which later ended up being something we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because it always been there. And I think a lot of weightlifters run into this is when I came into the sport, I had good mobility. I had a good baseline of strength. I was athletic. And I was able to progress in weight very quickly, and as a young athlete, like that's what you want to do. You just want to continue progressing in weight. And it's one of those where it's like, yeah, it's weird. It happens, but who cares? That like you care until you care.
And then you care. Yeah.
You care a lot.
When you can't lift, you care. Or you can't walk, you care. Right. Well, how did you get into lifting?
So 2008, watching the Olympics, I saw weightlifting and I'd known of weightlifting, the Olympic lifts. And I mean, I'd lifted through high school sports, really. I mean, just me in the weight room, I loved it. And hear these movements. We did the clean and football back in high school. I mean, we would single arm snatch dumbbells sometimes. And I knew I had a propensity for it. Like I was the only one in the school that could snatch 100-pound dumbbell, at like 15, whatever. And, but I didn't know how I was doing it, but I could get under it.
Got them hips, yeah.
I could get under this thing. And 2008 was just that push with the Olympic was like, man, I got to find this. So there I was on Google and found Mark. And, it was a funny story. That took like a year to connect with him because he ended up being in Iraq. And, the group, the people that were kind of keeping it going while he was gone, just weren't very good at response. Yeah. So luckily.
You were persistent though, because eventually you.
Well, actually another trainer here in Dublin, over at I can't remember where it was, but I finally tried them on my own because I didn't want to do the Olympic lifts on my own because I figured like there has to be something to taking your body weight and just over your head and, let alone double body weight.
Double body weight,
right?
yeah. It's been done.
There has to be something here. And I figured like, well, if I try it on my own, I'm just going to give myself bad technique.
That seems dangerous.
It's like,
but also cool.
Yeah. And I was like, there's got to be something to it. So finally I started to try on my own. And this trainer sees me and he comes up and I mean, just strong European accent, like Eastern. And he's like, where'd you learn? I was like, I haven't. I'm trying to figure it out. And he had like right here on his sternum was kind of rounded from the bar.
He had the mark, yeah.
And he's like, I lifted when I was young, very young. And he goes, see, the bone grew around the bar.
Yeah.
And he goes, I do not coach these, but I can teach you a couple of things. And we just worked together a little bit. And then he encouraged me to reach back out. He's like, no, reach out again. And
it's like cauliflower ear or the deadlift scars on your shins. Like, oh, you've done this before.
Yeah. So that got me into it, and it was.
And then you just eventually came in, like, fell in and found Mark and
Mark and just fell in love with it. Fell in love with the movement, fell in love with the opportunity to compete. Post high school, like I was hungry to compete, but I went to college for academics. And never found anything.
And barbecue,
and barbecue. I guess I competed in barbecue.
Yeah, there you go. You did.
And that was so you got into that after college.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like right at the end of college, right after.
And you got into that after diapers, right? Like you got out of
Basically.
diapers and started
There's
lifting?
actually a picture of me still in diapers holding on to my dad's weights.
I don't doubt
So,
this
yeah.
even for a little bit. So you started much earlier. You were definitely not out of college.
Correct.
Actually, you went into college to weightlift.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a different story, obviously. I started officially when I was 12, and it was a family affair for me. I have an older brother, and he was starting to get into football and just sports, and he wanted to get stronger, needed to get stronger. My dad's like, "You're gonna play football, like you got to be stronger than what you are." And so he started teaching my brother how to do the Olympic lifts. And they were learning from like Old Strength and Health. And my dad's best friend is now an Olympic coach,
Yeah.
Tim
Is
Swords.
he still coaching?
Yeah. So, on the phone with him, like learning stuff from him too, because my dad's background is more powerlifting. But he's like, if you want to be strong and explosive and prevent injury, you're going to learn the Olympic lifts. And so he's teaching my brother in that garage, and he's getting stronger. And
On powerlifting bars, I bet.
I don't even remember. It's probably it was a really old York bar.
Oh, all right.
It's probably a bushing bar, but it was a bar, like a Olympic bar.
I prefer bushing bars over needle bearings.
Interesting.
That was I don't agree with you.
Noted. Anyway, so
This will be the last time she talks to me.
long story short, dad's like, or Tim brings up like competition, like, Ryan, do you want to do this? And they're like, how do we do this? And he's like, oh, there's AAU Junior Olympics. And this is like 2000 maybe. So we drive ourselves to Virginia Beach. I watched my brother compete, and I was like, this looks freaking awesome.
How old are you?
I was 12.
You're 12 and you're like,
right?
that looks
Yeah,
cool.
it looks
though.
cool. So I was like, Dad, I want to learn. And he's like, my dad's amazing, and we have a great
Totally
relationship.
amazing.
And he is like, okay. I mean, like I had done, your kind of typical young girl sports like softball,
Yeah,
and
but you had to
basketball,
have- I mean, I know-
dance, and I was horrible at all of it.
But you had to have been wired like to push hard and
Probably,
focus. and
yeah. I didn't like team sports. So like at that time,
Team
like
sports is
it didn't make
awful.
any sense to me. I'm like, this seems stupid. And so when I saw the Olympic lifts, I was like, wait, like this is just me and just this bar, like it's all me. And I'm like, this seems awesome. So my dad humored me, took me to the gym and taught me. And I distinctly remember like periodically he would ask me for years, like, if you want to keep doing this, like you don't have to, like if you want to quit anytime, you don't have to keep doing this just because
You don't
like
have to
for
push
me, like I'm okay, like whatever you want. I'm like, no, Dad, I really like it. He's like, okay, but like, you don't have to do this for me. I'm like, and then I made my first nationals when I was 14. He's like, he stopped asking me after
Yeah,
that.
he's like, all right, we can do this.
So for me, it's always been a big family thing.
That's cool.
Like I always looked into my dad and my brother. Yeah.
That's awesome. And then he's just the funniest dude ever, but that's a topic for another time, maybe.
Yeah. So in this year hits 25 years in the sport for me.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool. Because so then you had success, and then you started working with Mark around 2008, or not 2008, around, was it 10 or 11?
Yeah. So I had trained with my dad forever, right? Even when I went to college, I was under a coach there, but still consulted with my dad. And long story short, I ended up leaving there after a year and a half to go back to being coached with my dad, and then made a junior world team. So that worked out pretty well for me.
Oh, he was your official coach when you did that?
My dad? Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah. For all of my teams, he was my official coach. And my brother was my secondary coach. And then really like how I started working with Mark was because I moved down here because of him, because of Drew. And so it's like, well, I'm here and lifting with the team, like,
Because you
I
hadn't
lived with
moved
the coach.
down when I first, we're
Correct.
pretty certain
I had
that
just
you were
ended up-
there.
I just happened to be
randomly
there.
dropping
Yes.
in.
Yeah.
Because I remember knowing or meeting you, and like you were just sort of training, and then I was asking about that, and they're like, "Oh yeah, she's up in Sandusky area, and
Yeah.
they're dating," and so it must have just been like a
I think he was still pursuing at that time.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
yeah.
Talk about persistence. That's another topic. But anyways, so I moved down here. He wore me down. Drew wore me down. I ended up moving down here in November of 2011. And and so started training down here.
Yeah, because it was. I reached out to. It was the
2012.
November,
I'm sorry, November
yeah,
2012.
Because I reached out to them in the fall of 11
Mhm.
in preparation for the Olympic trials,
Mhm.
and then we most certainly worked together because I kind of organized the medical team for
Yeah.
the Olympic trials, and you guys, Mark, for many, many years ran Olympic weightlifting at the Arnold,
Mhm.
and you guys were, just those are long days, like 16-hour days, going. And then we just sort of like stayed in contact because they had Holly there. You obviously helped out a ton with Holly. And I just sort of worked with them for a while. And then when you moved down, I just sort of sporadically would, your Blackfoot flare up or typical Olympic weightlifting stuff. And in the beginning, it was, all right, let me apply this stuff to these two cool athletes. And the moment you can kind of warm up without pain, good to go, green light, you're gone. And then we just sort of like stayed with it for a while, and then the Arnolds would come around and I would see you guys kind of sporadically.
Yeah.
And then I think we looked, Drew, it was the fall of 2014.
Yeah.
Where you had started having some issues. I'll let you go into this. Issues. And at that point, I had not seen you for a little bit. It wasn't like you guys were literally like, hey, I tweak my back, come in, 1 visit, 3 visits, whatever. I pop into the gym and see you. I think you guys had moved over to Endeavor at that point.
Yep.
And then I hadn't seen you in a little while. And then you come in with you actually like reached out to me. It wasn't like, hey, I got this. You had already had some stuff, imaging and things like that. So
yeah, the hip blew up. You could say the hip blew up. It was in preparation for the American Open final back in the day, and everything was going well until it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it was around 130 kilos in a clean. Like my leg would just start to tuck. It was like I'd lose control of it, and just pain, just sharp pain. Like it shut me down. And, it was one of those that, I often tell the story. I'm a big fan of multiple opinions. Mm-hmm. So, whereas, I saw you, I saw like 4 other docs in town, and it was really interesting because those 4 other docs were like, their message was open shut case surgery. Mm-hmm. Your message was maybe. And I'm a big fan of maybe. And
I don't like getting cut on.
And I know a lot of athletes who've had surgery and don't get better.
Yeah.
Like nothing changes.
It's not great.
And so like maybe I'm a skeptical by nature, but I'm just like,
It does require a lot of persistence on the athlete's part. So there's a lot of credit needs to be given to you because it's very easy to be short-sighted. Like, no, I need this fixed now. And then there's also the fixation of, well, you have this thing. I'll let you reveal to the crowd, who what it was. But I have this thing. I can see it on the MRI. I can see it on the X-ray. I mean, it's like me. I have 3 huge disc herniations. I've never looked at the CD because I don't want to see that. So there's a lot of dedication and persistence on your part to be like, okay, I can see the thing, but I'm going to try to rehab it.
Yeah, it was honestly. So you were the maybe. And then we got the MRI, I want to say right after.
Very soon,
It was like, hey, like maybe let's see this. And then the MRI came back. I think it said 2 partial tears in the labrum. And, basically, what you told me, you're like, hey, reach out to the guy from OSU, see who does the most hip scopes.
Doesn't matter.
No, it was a different one. But Ellis was who I eventually got the appointment with, but it's who did the most hip scopes in the region. Like where should you go? And number 2 was here in Columbus with Ellis. And he had a 26-week waiting list. And, you basically gave me what I always call the sweetheart deal. It was literally like, hey, I'll treat you in the clinic and write your program for the gym to match the treatment. And maybe, you won't have surgery and maybe you'll just be in really good shape for surgery. We'll let the surgeon have the final say. And it was like, that was a no-brainer to me because you were like, or you could just let me treat you and just go and do whatever in the gym. And that sounded dumb. And
so that would be, if there is a starting point for DNS, like an official starting point for DNS weightlifting or strength training, that would be it. Like I had been obviously applying it to weightlifting with you guys and some of the other athletes. Like CrossFit had gotten big at that time, and I was working a ton with them. But that was the first one where I was able to take my background in strength training and actually apply it to that, which again, to your credit, requires a lot. We'll get into the trust thing when we talk about, you guys and Francesca Duncan, and to actually just go, yeah, you can manipulate my program, or I just wrote the programs, and then actually getting into like tweaking the technique and all those things. Maybe it took I cannot lift. I mean, you had a tough time sitting in a car. I remember you were driving somewhere and like
driving a ton.
sitting there. Well, let's reveal to the crowd what it was. Oh, you already said the laborals here. Yeah. Sorry.
But then what happened through that 26 weeks, right? Rich was writing it.
Yeah, I mean, what was wild was a few things. So you look at that trust point, there were just, as you're learning as an athlete, you had revealed earlier, like, hey, my foot was doing this, and then, there were times where you would kind of whisper in my ear, you'd be like, hey, you're doing that movement wrong, right? and I'm like,
whisper, does he whisper?
And again, like I'm an
Does
athlete
he whisper? Yeah.
and I'm learning, and I go to my coach and be like, hey, doc said X, Y, and Z. And like the response would typically be like, well, no one else talks like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, okay.
I wish I could remember what those were, because we'll get into the differences between, or how DNS, as an explanation of movement function, how it influences lifting technique.
Mm-hmm.
I wish it might have been like foot loading or rib position or something like that.
I think it was. It was foot loading, how I'm pushing off the floor.
But Mark is
I'm
correct.
holding.
Nobody talks like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so it was like one of those, like, okay, well, I have a lot of trust in this coach, and my numbers have gone up, and I'm making progress. So it's almost like they kind of like going like, I hear that, and I'm acknowledging it, and I'm holding it, but I don't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And my trusted source doesn't know what to do with it. And so it's like just kind of in this vague area. And then once, this shut me down, it was like, wait a minute. Like I've done this path, and it was like, what's going on over here? And through the 26 weeks, so just to boil it down real quick, I went from unable to squat down to get into the bottom of the refrigerator to 85% of my best numbers, no pain, all symptoms gone, with a couple weeks to go to see the surgeon. And not only that, Rich, but like even how you worked with me in the sense of the intention and the focus and the care. Like there were like again, like looking at levels of coaching. Like I remember you'd write this, 3-week program, and then you'd be like, hey, we got to get on the phone. And I was like, yeah, okay. So we get on the phone, and I remember one time I loved it, but like how invested you were. It wasn't just like, hey, here's a program. If you do it, you do it. It was like, here's the program. Are you like, there was intensity. And I remember one time, you were like reading it and you're like, yeah, okay, now you're going to do a front squat with 5-second tempo up and down for 5 sets or, 5 reps. And I'm like, And like, I kind of was like, and you're just quiet. And you're like, that is 2 minutes under tension, whatever the calculation was. You were like that. Are you listening? I'm like, yes, I'm here. I'm listening. But that, like, it also showed me, like, I saw in myself even more energy and focus in this program because of how invested you were. Yeah. And it was like one of those, like, wow, like he's with me in this. Well,
yeah, and I had so. Chelsea's probably a lot like this. I had to be like that as an athlete. Like I wasn't a super talented athlete. I happened to be, in an amazing atmosphere with the team and have an incredible coach, but I had to be uber focused on everything that I was doing, all the way down to like the individual reps. And I probably was just excited to kind of do this thing because it's incredibly time consuming. Because what we basically did is you came in, I did like a full sort of like orthopedic mechanical evaluation. We did the DNS evaluation. We figured out, what we now in the strength training courses call target dysfunctions. And then in the clinic, probably in the beginning, we're doing like twice a week or something. We're doing rehab, like actual rehab, clinician generated forces, DNS exercises, manual therapy stuff. And then it started with no barbell. I know you started with no barbell, Chels, which was challenging probably.
Could take probably out of there.
And then we just sort of worked you back into the barbell. And then that's when we had to sort of like be talking about the technique and how you load your foot influences how your brain can control your hip, and how your bracing, influences how you can control your pelvis. And we had to sort of work from not lifting at all, rehab, all the way into like light lifting. And then actually let's put a barbell on there. Now let's put some load on there. And honestly, that process that I did with you, and then later with you, Chelsea, that's the process that we try to teach in the DNS Strength Training courses. And it literally takes 9 days, 3 separate courses to get to the point. Like you guys just took Strength Training 3, where you can have these open discussions about, okay, rifle through these tests, find the target dysfunction, what's the appropriate corrective exercise, and then how do you actually change the program and the cueing to to reinforce and train those strategies that we describe in DNS. I mean, that was literally the first swing at it to walk through that, which was awesome. It was just a ton of fun.
Yeah, it was super cool. And, you know, it just, again, like credit to you and just the excitement that you had around it.
Yeah.
Right. Like there was excitement. And, you know, then to go into the surgeon's office and, you know, we kind of teased after the fact, like, shoot, I should have took you with me. Cause like, you know, I go in and I mean, you know, I'd just a young athlete trying to do things on the cheap. I didn't even get an x-ray, you know, so the surgeon immediately ordered an x-ray, you know, and then they get it and they send it to him and we go in there and he comes in and he, you know, puts me through my paces with the hip. And then he just sits back and just stares at me and he goes, "That's a perfectly fine hip. There's nothing wrong with your hip." And I just stared at him and I go, "Well, you know, the MRI said, you know," and he like kind of like did this like pull back and he's like, "Okay." And he pulls it up and he's scanning through it and he stops and he points at a little white line on the, you know, black image. And he's like, maybe. And he's like, "But 80% of people have one of those walking around."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 100% of Olympic weightlifters that
Yeah.
lifted at the national level have
Yeah.
those.
And I looked at him, I go, you know, and through this process, I'd learned so much from you already and just, you know, just digging into it. I go, "Hey, like," I go, "Can, you know, you fall out of movement pattern for whatever reason. And because I'm going through the ranges of motion that I am with the loads that I am, inflammation gets so bad that it gives off signs of labral tear." And he got this huge grin and he was like, "Every day." And he's like, "Most people don't spend 26 weeks to fix it."
No, they just don't. And especially if they're an athlete and they're like really focused and like, you know, I want to actually fix it. It's better to have your own hardware, but they just get impatient. Like, I wonder, we'll get into your story here in a second, Chels, but I wonder if the timing was flipped, if you would have actually gone through the process without Drew sort of just being in your ear saying like, no. The answer is no.
The answer is no, I wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Just like knowing myself at that time and like where, you know, my background was like, I was that extraordinarily impatient athlete. Like, what's deload?
Driven's
a great word.
We'll
That's
driven is a nice word.
Stubborn.
That expresses itself as impatience. But
yeah, sure. And just, you know, again, I was so stuck in my pattern of like, well, this is what I've always done too. And like, don't even mention the word deload to me, let alone like taking months off.
Well, I mean, we talked about this when we were thinking about this, laying out the podcast. You could just push through stuff. So Drew would come in, or, you know, Holly or anybody, and I would work on them for a little bit. You were always would come in when you absolutely could not, you know, get out of pain or something. And the moment I could get you from like an 8 to a 5 after a warm up, it was like, "See you, Chels. See you when I see you." And then you would just sort of take off. And you and I have talked about this a lot, like that. To us, and this, you would say the same thing. I was like, I believe that. Yeah, I'm supposed to have back pain when I get done lifting.
Oh, it's totally normal. Like I had dealt with it for so long too, and like in the mentality that I had around like high level athlete, like pain didn't exist. You don't even let yourself feel it. Like you put it out of your head until like it's so bad that it shuts you down, right? And then it's like, well, again, how quickly can I get out of this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I remember talking this with you about this. Having back pain after Olympic weightlifting or squatting or deadlifting was an indication that I pushed hard enough. I thought it was delayed onset muscle soreness. And really what it was is like my discs and my spine were like, don't do this. But I took it as, well, this is kind of part of the process. Yep. And if I don't have pain, I'm not pushing hard enough.
Correct.
And as a B minus athlete with an A+ ability to grind and push, and I was driven enough, I needed to feel that. Like literally, if I did not have back pain in the shower the next day after a lower body training session, I didn't think I was working my back hard enough. I thought it was the muscles, it was the discs. But.
I mean, like even I can reflect back on how much Motrin I used to take. Like, I mean, every training session, 800 milligrams of Motrin. Every training session.
800 milligrams?
And, yeah, 800 every every time, right? And even when I did double days, right? Even when I did double days. Don't worry, I took it with food though, so my stomach's good.
Is it?
You know, but I'm like 18 at the time, like 17, 18 years old doing this. Like,
I mean, you're just a focus-driven person, so then you put it in the weightlifting world. But in hindsight,
it's like, I would never recommend that. If someone's doing that, I'd be like, hang on, we got to have a real conversation here. Like, that's not cool.
Well, I want to put a pin in that and talk about it later on, but like, talking about pain with training is one I'm a little bit sensitive to, because I hear a lot of sort of social media influencers and doctors that have never actually really trained. They're like, you should never train with pain. It's like, get the fuck out of here. Like you have to have some pain. So maybe we'll put a pin on that and talk about it later on, because that's a difficult thing to navigate, because you need to be able to expose to that. But we went through first swing at the DNS thing. Along the way, by the way, we became great friends and have continued to be great friends. So
there was a lot of appointments.
There was a lot of appointments there, and that was probably when we really started just kind of get to know each other. And then it was, well, I have it right here. Chelsea, yours was
June of 2015.
Yeah, June of 2015. And at that point, you guys had opened up Project Lift, right? And you actually, I think, being aware that it was so time consuming to do what I did, you asked literally a favor. And you had said, hey, would you be willing to do that again for Chelsea? I remember you literally asked me. It wasn't like hey, Chelsea needs you to do that thing. You just kind of knew like, oh, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And
I think you also had mentioned, like, I can't do this for everybody.
Yeah. No, I've actually only done the full thing for you two. I program for people all the time now. Usually it's kind of the plug-in programs that we talk about in DNS, strength training classes. If it's very, very rare situations, am I actually just writing programs. But I have never been able to stand there. I mean, because you guys were rehab, assessment, rehab, strength training, technique, everything all the way. I just don't get to do that anymore. So you said, would you be willing to do this for Chelsea?
Yeah.
And I said, of course. And you were working and you couldn't stand.
Correct.
You couldn't training wasn't even a thing. You were more concerned with like, can I walk?
Yeah. I had at the time, because like I had another job and I had to stand pretty much all day, and like I really couldn't very much at all. Like a ton of, hot cream on my back and probably some more Motrin.
800 milligrams of Motrin every 2 hours.
And it was like, and then Drew finally was like, I'm not going to help you put your shoes on anymore. Like this has happened way too many times. And like, this wasn't just like, in this year, like I have been dealing with this for 8 years at the time, on and off, if not more.
Was this the longest bout, or was it the most severe? Because you had pain all the way down your leg and you had weakness in the leg.
Yeah, I've had it before, but I think he finally was like, his tolerance for my tolerance. His intolerance for my tolerance.
I remember what I told her. I said, listen, doing the same thing and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. And I have a guy.
You know him, actually.
And then my next thing was like, well, you're going to have to go to the appointments with me because I don't know how to handle him. You were much more enthusiastic back then than you are
just
today.
Just as enthusiastic. Maybe have slightly more control over it, maybe. We're both intense people.
Yeah, we're both very intense people. And so Drew was a nice, middle ground. He's like, I'll go with you. I'm like, okay. And he did. And but like for me, when we first started working together, it was completely paradigm shifting. I talked about this before with you of like, you're challenging me to question and rethink everything that I'd known to be true that had worked for the last 15 years.
Yep.
And that was super hard. And then me being a wonderful control freak addict had to give up a lot of control too, because I did this is a whole uncharted territory for me. But it's like, okay, well, I saw what happened here. I have trust in him, and he has trust in you. So that kind of bridged the gap. And
you couldn't walk. I think that's a relevant piece there.
Sure, yes.
I don't know if it wasn't that bad and it was just back pain with lifting, you probably just would have been like, yeah, I'll just keep doing this.
It's all, I mean, it was just, and, at the time too, like perspective here, I was like 24, and I hadn't been able to compete at the national level in like 2 years because of this. And like, that was like so detrimental to my mindset because, I've been on 4 international teams. I had, medaled at nationals. I had won juniors. Like I had been 3-time youth national champion, like all these things, all these accolades. And here I am 24 and can't even like get out of bed. Like that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. And now I'm starting to be like, a little bit starting of like, future starting to get into my head of like, what's this going to be like in 5, 10, 15 years? Never had I thought about that before.
Nope. It's got to be pretty bad to have that pop into your head at 24.
Yeah. So it was finally like, okay, like really what choice do I have, in this moment? And like, let's just, okay. And it was,
well, I'm glad you chose it because it was literally the strength training class wouldn't exist without you two. So talk about, so we did basically the same thing with you that we did with Drew, only yours was a back injury and we had to sit you out longer.
Yep.
And there was a not so pleasant amount of time where you had no barbell work.
Yeah. We had about 6 months of no barbell.
No barbell. And that was completely rehab the back. That was a lot of treatments, in the office. And then the same thing, going in and starting back with, rehab exercises in the gym, slowly adding load. A lot of the stuff that it's kind of neat because you guys just got certified last year in November, and you're seeing basically now a systematic explanation of what we were playing through. Like your guys' input about all that process that we did was essentially the template for the DNS strength training classes. And so we did basically the same thing with you, worked you back up. The super proud moment in my life, you wanted to get back, and your first goal was to qualify for American Opens, which is a national level meet without this quite as high of a qualifying standard as nationals.
It's right behind senior nationals by a couple kilos.
And in August of 2016, at Project Lift, you guys hosted a weightlifting meet. I came there to shoot photos. So a lot of the photos, this is kind of a cool thing. I like you as a person and wanted to highlight you too. You're sort of featured throughout the the strength training courses. But that meet is the meet where you actually hit the goal and you actually went, you overshot the goal because you qualified for senior nationals and also American Open.
Yep.
Which was super awesome. So you were able to get back there and without the same kind of pain.
No pain.
With no pain.
No pain.
Which we can talk about that a little bit later on. But walk us through the process of being a driven athlete that had been at the national level. You had been doing it this one way. A little bit of a control is important to you. I don't know how to say that. However you want to say it. Actually very much like I was a very sort of similar athlete. Yeah. I was kind of like a control freak and neurotic. I would try to, again, the story I would tell myself is I have to get everything right in order to compete against these people. So, I had 4 or 5 Olympians around me. I was not wired like them. So I was like, I have to get it all right. Right. And so then I had a very dialed in sort of warm up routine, or I needed to be at the place at this moment. And it was overly rigid in the beginning. And if anything went wrong, just fucking banana. Like I was just all over the place and like super stressed and, amygdala hijack at that point, just like super mad and angry. And I can't do this. Can you believe that stuff? Like they moved the warm up time by 10 minutes. Okay. Like, who cares?
Okay, I wasn't that neurotic, but
right. I was pretty bad. But then you were very sort of like focused and driven and controlling in a good way to get there. So walk us through the process as an athlete where you're like, okay, this is what I used to do. And then now you've got this dude telling you like, yeah, you're not going to touch a barbell for a while. That can't have been easy.
I love his inhale when you said
the eyes.
No, it was truly the hardest training I've ever done. Out of, that goes to the days when I was lifting 10 times a week, squats and lifts every single training session. Like that was the hardest training because the mental side of it, that is a huge component because it's like, okay, I'm in the gym 4 days a week doing only 2 different types of program and none of it was barbell. And it was just repeated for like 3 weeks on end before anything would change. It's like, here I am again.
Doing the same thing.
Here it is again. Okay, I get to move in this much range. Like, it's just, it was hard. And like so many times, like he had to talk me off the ledge of just like, what's going on? It's just like, oh, this is never going to end. And like really in hindsight, it was a drop in the bucket, 25 years in the sport, like what's 9 months? What's 6 months? Like it's nothing.
Well,
right?
How much less pain you have.
Yeah. And it's like, and then again, the long-term implications of that. So it was super hard. But I had committed to it, you had committed to it, and he was holding me to the commitment. Like it was truly a good anchor.
Team effort here.
And again, I just then I started to build traction and things started to like feel better, and it created more curiosity then. It's like, okay, getting into lifts, like, but I had to relearn truly everything. How do I grip the bar? How do I set up? How do I move off the floor? How do I like, I had to relearn all of that. And I remember sitting in the gym, because most of the time I train by myself, just that's how it worked with the timing. I would like, well, I don't know what I'm feeling. Like, I thought this and I felt like this. And so I would film myself, be like, okay, I'm going to think about this one thing, right? Like whatever that was, and just embrace that feeling. And then I do the lift, and then I look at the video and, you know, see how it was executed. And it's like, okay, that looks accurate. Okay, let's hold on to that cue and rinse and repeat. If it was like, hey, no, like totally didn't go that way, like, okay, well, let's let go of that thought, try something different. And then I would use Drew, be like, hey, you know, like this is what I'm seeing. Like, what do you see with this? Like, how am I supposed to move in this? Rich said X, Y, and Z. What does that mean in like the, you know, in the movement terms? Because again, he's a couple years ahead of me on this already, and a couple years ahead of me on coaching too. So he was a really good translator, if you will, for all of that, and like really bridging the gap between like the clinic talk and the gym talk, if you will. Because I had only, like the gym vernacular is really where my brain works.
Yep.
So again, then when we started to put the lifts on, the weight on the bar, and it's like, wait, I haven't lost any strength. Like that was really crazy.
That's the fucked up part, because people think that if you're not doing the lifts, you're going to get weaker.
No, I got so much stronger. Like it was like the way I could just move and handle weights. Like I wasn't just plopping under the bar. I wasn't like, there was no flimsiness to it. Like there was a solidness to my movement that I had never had before. And like I remember,
you're naturally very flexible, and
Sure,
so
yeah.
you didn't have like that as much, maybe the stability is what you're kind of feeling.
Yeah. And like that was like, whoa, what is this? And then, you know, my dad's watching me lift too. And he was like, never moved like this before. And, you know, he's seen me lift for the last however many years, you know, since day one. And so, you know, once we started to load and things were moving well and I was feeling good. And then like here, all of a sudden I'm lifting, you know, 90% of my best lifts at a lighter body weight.
Yeah.
And I don't hurt after a session. I'm like, what's going on? And I'm only lifting 2-3 days a week.
As opposed to what were you
5, 6, 7, 10 up to 10 times a week. Like, I mean, it was way different. The least amount of lifts I'd ever done, the least amount of squats I'd ever done. And yet I'm getting stronger and moving weights better. And I'm like, and feeling better. I'm like, what is happening?
And there's probably stuff that's, we'll get into when we talk about the programming and how the DNS stuff has influenced you guys. Because you guys, I mean, honestly, you guys are deploying the strength training material as good as anybody. But one of the things that we were doing in there is you were doing lots of lifts outside the sagittal plane and all these goofy things that weren't on a platform holding a barbell, you know, those sort of constrained bilateral symmetrical movements that we talk about in the strength training classes, where you're just locking yourself in the sagittal plane.
Yeah.
And then you overdevelop the sagittal plane. You end up getting what you and I have so well, that extension, compression, stabilizing strategy. But was that weird to, instead of just spending most of your time on a platform, you know, doing cleans and then doing pulls and then doing RDLs, you know, and then doing squats, you know, and that just everything on the platform there?
Yeah, like, I mean, it really had like flipped where like, you know, I would spend like 1 or 2, you know, exercises off the platform to now like I'm only spending 1 or 2 exercises on the platform. And like, you know, over time I've gotten, you know, better and more honed into the programming and to like, you know, variety of movements and stuff like that, where it's like I'm even more, I don't know when I say this, like even more variability to my exercises and more tuned in to like.
Which is very against the traditional norm.
Yeah. But I mean, like, you know, I still do snatches, still do clean jerks, and still do, you know, like tempo squats. But I counter that with, okay, we have this many sagittal plane movements. We need to have, you know, a good amount of variety.
Which again is it's very against the norm. So let's transition over and then talk about that. So you guys have Project Lift, which is a great Olympic lifting gym. You've got in-person stuff. You guys do online programming stuff. You've got local people, this great community here. You've also got athletes all around the world, including some really, really high-level athletes. And for me, I love watching you guys do this stuff because I don't get to. This is always super hard for me. I don't get to do it. And so for me, you guys have been such a huge part of actually building the thing that we've built, but then you're doing the thing. You know, I love my job. I don't get to be on the front line. And so you guys are front line talking to people who are interested in weightlifting, or you guys are just absolute rock stars at working with athletes who are like, I'm kind of broken here. I want to keep doing this thing. And then they end up going all the way down these rabbit holes and finding you guys. And then you're able to use the DNS stuff and a lot of other tools that you've come across along the way and walk these people from broken but determined to get back to doing this. And then through, you know, the Project Lift system now, which of course encompasses a lot more than just the DNS stuff, you're actually deploying this in a way that you're having real life influence and effect on people, both, oh, now I get to do this thing that I love doing without pain, and also, oh, I get to actually perform at a better level. So you have this gym. So, you know, how has DNS influenced, you know, you guys as coaches, as athletes, as, you know, programming, whatever, the technique, how has it influenced that stuff?
Yeah. You know, for me, right after the whole story with the surgeon, you know, and he was like, basically he was like, hey, like perfectly fine hip, no way I would do surgery on it. Like, go do what you want to do. If it happens again, come see me. Well, it's never happened again. But walking out of that appointment, you know, I literally came back to you and I was literally like, what did you do? You know, and then I was like, and then it was like, will you mentor me? You know, like, will you show me? And, you know, you started to guide me down the DNS path, you know, starting with some of their other, you know, stuff where, like, you look at strength training, like it's so much more put into like, hey, this is how you take the principles of movement and bring them into the gym. Where, man, like the first thing I learned in my first DNS course was that Drew didn't know anything at all.
Well, you took exercise 1.
He was with the clinicians.
Yeah, like it was so clinical based. And I remember, you know, we're standing by a table, someone's on the table, and they're like, "We're going to palpate this area." And I look over at a doc, and I'm like, "What's palpate?"
Yeah, what's palpate? Can you help me out here?
But you know, just. So looking at that, like, it really made me realize it didn't have to happen. The hip didn't have to happen. Like, none of it had to happen. Like, it was all the foundation of movement. I'm glad it happened. I think for a lot of athletes, unfortunately, our injuries are the catalyst for deeper learning. However, at that point, I was like, why would I teach weightlifting any other way? Like, why would I set an athlete up to have to learn that lesson that I did? I mean, they don't have to listen to me. And that's the thing. Like, we talk about this building trust and these things. Like, I started to go in and go like, okay, like what can I do? And I mean, I'm a user at a very early stage where, like, I'll start testing these things when I'm not certified, when I haven't taken an official course. Like, I've just gone through it myself, and I'm going to try to reiterate to you and see if I can support. And I was teaching all over the city at this point, weightlifting. And,
you were doing weightlifting, world, yeah.
Well, doing these classes weekly all around. But basically, I remember the first time I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. Like, I was still in the process. I hadn't even seen the surgeon yet. I was still in the process of working with you and like learning and whatnot. So we're in the middle of those 26 weeks. And I'll never forget, this girl comes in to this session. I used to do this like 6-week class across town. She comes in.
Is this Jerry or Amy?
No.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah, she puts, you know, hard-earned money in my hand, you know, and it's like, all right, touches the barbell, and like all alarms go off in my head. It's like, she should not even have a barbell in her hand, right? And so, like, my first lesson, you know, that day as we're warming up was creating intra-abdominal pressure. You know, so they're all down on their backs and they're doing these things, and she couldn't do it. And it's cute because the other people in the class are like kind of scooting next to her and like, here, feel me. You know, like everyone's trying to help her, you know. And so I'm just like, the person that I am, I'm like, okay, not going to touch barbell. See how long this lasts, right? And 6 weeks, I pushed her through this, no barbell. She's taking a weightlifting class. She doesn't touch the barbell for 6 weeks, right? And I'm thinking, she's never coming back, right? Like, she's never coming back. Here she comes, next class, hard-earned money in my hand. I'm like, cool. 4 more weeks, no more barbell. She was in like law enforcement. So like at week 10, she kind of gave me the tough talk.
Yeah.
You know,
all right, that's cool, but.
And I was like, fair. Like, in her justification, she'd like.
You wouldn't need 10 weeks now, though.
No. She'd gotten a lot better, right? And I'm like, cool. So anyways, you know, we start doing some drills. We start getting the barbell in hand. long story short, she has to take a little bit of hiatus. I'm thinking like, okay, like, we did what we did. We'll see if you come back. But she got like a completely unrelated injury that just had her out of the gym. And then she comes back when she's healed from that, and she puts hard-earned money in my hand. It was like 12 weeks gone, right? Well, it turns out she had continued what we'd been working on.
Yep.
And well, here's the thing, Rich. She comes up to me and she goes, hey, guess what I can do? And I'm like staring at her. I'm like, brace? And she's like, drops down into the 3 month. She's like, test me. And Rich, like, it was way
good brace,
better, right? She got up, she looked me in the eye and she goes, you were right. Everything changed. My push-ups, my handstands, my barbell work, Rich, I would come into this gym that I had, other than Drew just coming in to do this class for him weekly, she would literally wait for me, even if she wasn't taking my class, to come and pass like a check through me of what other coaches told her about things to see if she should listen to it.
Oh, cool.
And it was one of those where it's just like that's just changed the foundation. Mm-hmm. So it's like since this time I've been looking, going like, how can we implement this in? How do we implement it easier? And saying earlier, like, it's been fun watching the journey. Like, it's been really neat because, even as you've gone through your process developing what is, strength training, like it's been iteration after iteration.
There's been multiple.
You said things one way and then you're like, no, I like it. Say it this way. And it's just like, and it's like continuing to get to work with you and seeing that in myself. It's just been these iterations. So for me, again, like after my experience, it was like an athlete doesn't need to go through that. Mm-hmm. Like I can create a foundation and here's what we're going to do. And since then, I mean, Chelsea's going to test how many clients we've had come in. Our systems have gotten better at building trust and doing this, but at a certain point, like they'll just hit and they're like, hey, like their numbers are going up and they're like, my back doesn't hurt anymore. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to.
And then they're like, oh, I just thought it was normal. And then just those conversations start to come out.
The bracing is the one for me, if I think about, the strength training class is 9 days divided into 3-day courses. Mm-hmm. It's essentially the undertone of the whole thing is just mastering bracing. Like the first one is just sagittal plane. Everything is bilateral and symmetrical. All the exercises, the assessments, and the correctives that we do. And then you get into strength training 2. We break out of the sagittal plane, but we're still talking about stabilization. But now we have to handle torsional forces. And now we get into more torso movements. And then the third one is just about mastering integration. So you're doing the testing, you're prescribing the corrective exercise, and then you're programming the strength training. But all of it is really just about teaching how to actually brace and stabilize properly. Mm-hmm. And I was actually talking to one of the Strong First instructors when I was in Italy, and nobody teaches bracing. Mm-hmm. Like everyone just kind of assumes you know how to do it. Mm-hmm. Just or they put
a belt on. It's like
put a belt on, belt's on, cool, or just say tighten up, or brace. And these are things. The reason that I have in the strength training course, we're talking about like, okay, brace is nothing more than a non-specific cue to get an athlete to consciously stabilize. Mm-hmm. How they do that is completely different. So it's just like, okay, go run over here or squat down. Mm-hmm. Everyone's going to squat slightly differently. Everyone's going to brace differently. Well, not every bracing strategy is going to be equally effective. Mm-hmm. And so one of the biggest things for me, and it sounds like it's the same thing for you, is that the bracing strategy and actually going in and using the assessments and then walking through some of the DNS exercises to just make sure that the athlete has a proper brace before we start loading it or before we start applying it to a complex movement like a hinge or a squat or a snatch.
Yeah. But there is the flip side to that too, of like people come to us to learn how to lift, right? Yeah. They don't come to us to learn how to brace. And so that's always like the delicate balance of that. It's like, well, we need this competency, but that's not what you're paying us for, right? So again, part of our system and how we integrate is giving them what they want, but also giving them what they need.
Well, that's some of the hardest stuff in the strength training classes. In the clinical classes, somebody walks in the door and they have shooting pain down their leg. Okay, well, this is pretty easy. I can be as picky as I want. Mm-hmm. So DNS started in the clinic, right, by Pavel Kolar. And as something that started in the clinic, the precision and the standards for the quality of movement are incredibly high because you want to get them out of pain. Well, if somebody walks in the door and they're like, "Hey, I want to go to American Opens, or I want to get better at Olympic weightlifting for CrossFit or whatever," and they're not in pain, now suddenly the line for where you can let them fall into dysfunction, or do you have to keep them perfect, or how long do you keep them out of a barbell is way harder. So, you have to really think about the long-term scope. You're just slowly improving their ability to do these things like foot loading, like, the receive position, the snatch correctly, like a brace. But you can't expect perfection because they walk in the door. You're with them for 3 months and they're like, hey, can I actually like pick up a fucking barbell?
Yeah.
Like I want to do something. So you have to kind of like navigate those waters, and you guys are fantastic about sort of like meeting the athlete where they are and knowing what it is and sort of figuring that out. Because, and actually maybe Francesca is probably a good place to talk about this. So Francesca, who's also a certified strength coach.
Yeah.
Why don't you guys tell that story? Because that's a high level, long story where you basically had to have this national level athlete. Kind of, you actually sort of convinced her how to sort of walk the path that you walked, but without like this catastrophic injury.
Yeah, but I didn't also sales pitch her on it either. Like she came to a little bit on her own. Like she's definitely a bit of a I'd say like a wonderful unicorn too, in the sense of like she's curious. She wants to know the why. Like,
great taste in music too.
That's what I hear. I mean, she came like she had already qualified for an American Open, right? So this is out of 22.
22, yeah. COVID.
I was like, wait, hang on a second. What year is it?
Yep.
But she, had some issues with her coach, looking for a different one, referral, blah, blah, blah. Right. So, she comes to work with us remotely, by the way, right?
Yep.
She's not in person. So we're doing all of this stuff online.
Way harder.
Way harder. And she's with us she goes through our standard intro process that we still have today, lift strong, 3 months, intensive work, take numbers down, walk through relearn how to lift, right? Basically. And there's the stability stuff or the DNS work stuff trickled in there too. And at the end of it, she's lifting the same weights, but she doesn't hurt because she was experiencing, she's again, like most of us, I'm supposed to have back pain, blah, blah,
Back,
blah, blah,
hip, shoulder. That's what
Then she stays on with us. She's like, I really liked your guys' approach. Like, I really just like your attention and I want to keep you on as a coach. Cool. Awesome. So 2 months after that program ends, we go to under 25 nationals and she ends up winning it. She PRs everything. And she's like, this was awesome. Right. So, we continue to work and through this time, she's going to American Open finals. She's, coming to the Arnold, she's doing nationals. Those are kind of her 3 major ones. But pretty much every cycle, like something would hurt. Something would like, hey, we're dealing like my back kind of felt funky this day. And so like I had to take a couple days off, or I need to switch with this, or now my shoulder hurts, or my neck this. Like it just, all these little things kept building and building. And, she's still competing. She's medaling. She's doing this and that. And then the numbers start to kind of stagnate a little bit, right? And then she's just not feeling the groove anymore. She's starting to feel like that grind. This is only like maybe 2 years in too. Like this is a pretty condensed time period. And so it was 2023. Yeah. We're coming out of AO1 and she had a really big back injury or like shut down the week of going into it. We get her here early. We get her in to see Kraft, your associate, and he gets the pain down. It's like, hey, she's supposed to compete in 3 days. Like,
those are fun.
Super fun. Thankfully though, like she had all had the work up to this, like, hey, we got to just chill anyways. Like, deload, as we're going into the meet, like taper down. Cool. And we had built enough trust that like she trusted us. So Kraft got her down pain level where she was safe to compete. Cause I'm like, girl, if this ain't going to be safe, you're not going to do this. And so he greenlit her. She lifted great numbers. She's on the Rogue platform that year, right?
Yeah.
So in front of everybody and like,
big platform for sure.
So she goes home. But like the back thing is still lingering. I'm like, listen, so finally like we're coming into like, okay, we have to make a decision. Are we going to nationals? Cause like we got a plan and I can't remember where it was that year and like expense, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hey, we're going to have a really challenging conversation here. And this is hard for me too. I go, but I really want both of us to sit down and talk about, is going to nationals the best thing for you this year? You've been dealing with this back on and off for, the last few years. Shoulders getting you, it's getting you here. Like we can't even complete, we're having a hard time getting through even training cycle. I would love for you to work on this in a much deeper way and actually take the time to work on instead of like, oh, got to be in a competition cycle. Oh, got to be in a competition cycle. I go, but I'm going to support your choice. I go, but this is what I see. We sit this out. We work for these couple months. We come back for American Open finals. Like, this is what I see. I go, but totally your choice and I support that. So she sat with it and she's like, she comes back and she's like, okay, that was a really hard conversation to have. She's like, I was kind of mad at first. Then I was like, wait, she got my best interest in mind. Like what's here for me? And so we made the collective, the combined choice to sit out nationals that year.
Which is a tough move.
Super hard. But she was very happy she did because now this started to really lead her into the deeper DNS stuff, right?
So she was on the middle of that, I think, when she started taking.
She had taken one.
She took one and then was two.
Two was like that year, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, something like that. So yeah, like it pulled her into that of like, okay, where am I? And then that led into some deeper stuff around like mindset and emotions and things like that too. But we did the work. And she's starting to ask better questions. She's starting to tune into herself more. She's even starting to question like, well, why do I want to, lift super heavy all the time and this and that? What is there, right? And so it totally changed her programming. We're now what I kind of consider more of a hybrid method where it's like 2 days of, there was like at the time, maybe 2 days of barbell, which is more technical focus. And then 2 or 3 days of the stability, the DNS work. And a lot of non-sagittal plane, but then also like, even just asymmetry in the sagittal plane, because we got to be in that, right? That's our sport. And so we went through this whole process and she came back to competition. She felt better. Back is now pain super down, like she's moving better. And her numbers start to move, like she's lifting weights with no pain that, previously she had.
Well, she's had a great
she was
meet
dealing with stuff.
Ago.
Well, yeah. And then she continues to go further down the rabbit hole with DNS and just her commitment and her, what's the word I want to look for? Like she became a really responsible athlete. Like she's leaving better notes. She's having better conversations with me. She's asking deeper questions. Maybe. Yeah. Like she's more committed into this. Ownership. Thank you. Yeah. She's taking more ownership of her program. She's like, hey, I remember Rich talk about this exercise in DNS. So I really liked it during the course. So I just started adding that in as my warm up. Awesome. Like, great job. I don't have to program, absolutely every little thing. Like think this, like she's implementing this and holding herself accountable with that as well. And it was just like super cool. So now we have this really cool symmetry or flow going back and forth between our coach athlete relationship, right? So then, fast forward into this last meet that we just did, AO Finals 2025. Mm-hmm. And she had lifetime PRs. She felt amazing. And she had a knee tweak in August that had her off of actually full lifts for like almost 2 months, right? But because of the work, because of the work that we had done though, and the mindset that we had and the things that she was working on, like she was able to still stay the course. So then when we went back into the list, we were able to gently, progressively start to load it again. Here's this trust. I understand the process now. I've done through this a couple times. And boom, here we go. Like 2 weeks out of the meet, she hit a lifetime PR, like snatch of 102 and clean and jerk of like 118. And she was just like, holy smokes.
What's her body weight?
At the time, she weighed about 75. Yeah. She's a 77 is the weight class. So then at the meet, she has a lifetime competition PR snatch and total, and she doesn't hurt. And she feels amazing. And now she's coming out of this. She doesn't have, she's able to continue to train, right? And now the conversations that we're having going into the next competition is like a little bit more of that hybrid. Because it's like, hey, maybe we only do a full true competition cycle for finals and nationals. And then AO, we have this different type of fluidity with programming now, which is really, really cool. And she's totally bought in because she's seen how it's supported her. She's done the work. And she's of course had moments where it's like, is this working? Is this? And
there's an impatience that naturally happens.
Of course.
So that's tough. But how would you say the DNS material has influenced the way that you program for Olympic weightlifting?
I mean, it's if you were to read it as a classical coach, you'd be like, what the hell is this? Mm-hmm. It's like
But what is the so
So classical,
I think
everything.
What is the classical coach?
Yeah, so it'd be like everything in sagittal plane. Like, it would be you're warming up with, the bar. Then you're going into, a snatch complex of some type or a full snatch, and you're working in 80 to 90% plus range. Or then you're finishing with squats, and then every accessory work you're doing is like an RDL or everything's in sagittal
All
plane.
sagittal planes.
Row.
Everything's with a barbell,
Yeah,
right? And even if it's not with a barbell,
and,
it's still in a sagittal plane.
Yep.
It's still there's still that constriction. So
that's old school.
sure, that's
Or it actually doesn't even old school. That's traditional. That's
pretty
what
traditional.
most people are going to get if they walk into an Olympic weightlifting gym right now.
tons of squats, tons of volume. Good luck.
Yeah.
And
It works until it doesn't.
exactly, yes, it works until it doesn't. Like that is really the subtext there. But so our programming, we still, there's a barbell warm up, but sometimes there's like priming movements, right? It's like, hey, like we're breathing in 3 months, like open this up, work this out, like open the calf and open this, and especially if someone's dealing with something, right? But then we have like 2 or 3 platform movements, right? Depending on where somebody is. So
Where they're on the training cycle.
yeah, that's
stuff,
absolutely going to dictate it, right?
Yeah.
But pretty typical person. Right now we're in between competition seasons, right? We're about to start at the end of the month. So people have, typically average people train 3 days a week. And then it's like they have a technical warm up. They have a complex of some kind of like snatch, clean, or jerk. And then they finish with up tempo, pause, squat, only if they're doing front squats. Typically, if they're doing cleans, I have them do lunges on those days. I don't like to load the front rack twice.
Mhm.
Every time we snatch and clean jerk, that's also a squat. And then they have 2, 3 or so DNS accessory movements. So scissor rotations or single arm bent over row or single arm I love throwing rotations into things too. So it could be like a rotated bent over row. It could be.
But that's
but
kind of the
we're
weird.
focused on foot pressure and all that.
Yeah, that's the weird stuff that we had to do with you to get you sort of out of pain. So I think one of the big ones is getting out of the sagittal plane. Even normal strength training tends to be very sagittal plane driven because you're holding a barbell. Lifting heavy shit is cool.
It's our sport.
But I mean, this goes for really any sport. But then getting out of the sagittal plane is a big one.
Yeah.
And then obviously the cueing stuff. You've both mentioned foot loading, teaching the bracing stuff, then using actual DNS corrective exercises that are based in developmental kinesiology. Like, so these are developmental kinesiology, essentially the science of how we evolve, neurologically, structurally. As humans, in that first 18 to 24 months. So the developmental exercises that we always reference in DNS are basically developmental milestones where you learn certain things like to load your hip or to breathe or brace correctly. Having those things in there, I think are very, very different, but those are wildly different than you would normally get in
100%.
a typical strength training thing. Now, what about technique? So we've talked a lot about, how you get out of the sagittal plane, you're using the developmental stuff, the bracing, all that stuff. What are some things specifically in the technique that go against what we all may have done early on with the traditional weightlifting that now that the DNS stuff that you've changed the way that you're actually cueing that?
Sure. So, when you look at the technique from a standpoint of traditional, right? Let's start with foot loading. Now, I think foot loading's gotten a lot more popular in weightlifting.
Yeah, full foot loading's got more popular.
Yeah, full foot loading, starting to hear more and more people talk about the tripod, base of big toe, base of pinky toe, heel. You look at that activation throughout. And, this is one thing that we've talked about is like, okay, so we start with that language, just how nitpicky do you get? Right. And one thing for us is like, yes. So like, all right, we're looking at the technique. So we're highlighting it in technique, say, good foot loading. Let's just start there. But then also in any other movement, every movement can be a bracing exercise if it's cued correctly. Yeah, so, is our foot still loaded in these other movements? I think one of my favorites is just the classic, bent over row with your hand on a bench. It's like, if you watch people, they just collapse into the hand, or let alone
they're not paying attention to the sport.
It's like you're just, I don't know, like a puddle moving weight with one arm.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So, you look at that technique, but then that right there, if you're just looking at the foot loading, that already starts to change how you're getting set to the bar. Right. And if we start to add more elements now, if we're looking at how is that torso set up, right?
Well,
So,
that's a big one.
Huge.
Huge one.
so language, we'll use is, okay, starting off with rib and pelvis and starting to understand, like, can people even understand and feel the rib and pelvis in space, right? Like, pulling it back and seeing that layer of going like, hey, can we get rib and pelvis in line? Well, okay, well, when do we breathe? Right? Like, all right, so, here's helping them understand a breathing pattern to get set to the bar. Right. And then once they're able to start to bring these elements in, how we're pushing off the floor, being able to keep full engaged foot, being able to keep that torso relationship throughout the movement.
Well, let's tease that out here a second.
Yeah.
So traditional strength training is going to be, basically butt back, chest up. So that's arching your low back, tightening up your back, tightening up your lats, whatever. And that's going to have your rib cages elevated, the pelvis is tilted forward. And so in the strength training class, we call that an extension compression stabilizing strategy because you're using extension and compression of the spine with your big old back muscles to stabilize. Intentionally or otherwise, that is what 95% of Olympic weightlifters are doing.
Yeah.
But what you guys are talking about is taking, the DNS stabilizing model, which is you want the rib cage and the pelvis to be sort of connected through the abdominal wall and intra-abdominal pressure. And now the primary stabilizing force is intra-abdominal pressure instead of compression and extension of the back. And that's wildly different. So if you've never actually done heavy Olympic weightlifting, when I first started doing it myself, and then of course with you, Chelsea, to try to keep the ribs down, so pulled down towards the rib cage, and staying over the bar, staying over the bar is something you hear a lot in Olympic weightlifting, but to then pull the rib cage down, it feels like you're 10 feet over the bar. Yeah. And it feels unstable at first, and then you have to really sort of trust the system. So those are major differences. So okay, the torso position, shoulder maybe a little bit.
Yeah. You look at the shoulder from a standpoint of, there's technique models out there that ask you to internally rotate when you turn the bar over. You see it out of the Russian technique all the time. And if you go deep down into that as a weightlifter, you start to realize they will then strengthen the traps as much as possible. And it's all technical because if we receive the bar in competition and there's an elbow bend, it's no lift. But if you internally rotate, you start to put the arm in a position where it's more difficult to bend the elbow, and they're just going to build up the traps. And if you break, you break. Yeah. I think it's interesting when you start to look at that, sure, they're trying to build up the traps so you don't break, but then also they're putting you into a position that may cause pain to, aim at a competitive advantage. And these are deeper conversations to have with athletes. Yet, and you look at the beginning system, I would say, someone who's never weightlifted before, a little easier to bring them into these patterns. Yeah. When you have somebody that comes in and they've weightlifted before, I see it a lot more as planting seeds, right? Okay, we're planting these seeds, we're starting to go and really leaning on our accessory work to build patterns to then be able to continue to bring them over to the technique in the barbell.
Yeah.
I think you hit on started to kind of get into a really deep point there of what's changed with how we program, and what's different is such a deeper long-term focus, right? So it's we're looking at 3, 5, 10 years down the road. How are you moving and where are your lifts? And are you even able to still do it versus athlete comes in, especially with prior experience, I want to, hit this year's American Open. And they're moving shit. And it's just how you build that again, it's that balance of it's hey, I this stuff takes time too, right? Again, it's back to that give them what they want, but also what they need at the same time. But being responsible coaches as well is hey, you can just grind yourself into the ground and hit this total this one time, or we can really aim at next year, 2 years nationals and build this super foundation where now, you're able to do, hit there plus and then some. Now we're in top 10. Now we're going
With
to the nationals
pain.
After that. We're not hurting, right? We can do this for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, not just this 1 year, this one competition, this singular focus.
Well, and that's actually that's a good place to end here. That's essentially the difference between DNS and other systems. So you mentioned, turning the elbow in. That's for performance reasons. So you lock the elbow there, or you push the shoulders up because you're pushing against the bar. These are things that go against what we describe in DNS as sort of optimal movement. So optimal movement for those of you that don't know what it is. In DNS, Pavel Kolar basically, using developmental kinesiology, essentially describes the way that we as a species have evolved to move. So what we teach in the DNS strength training classes and what we actually try to get in the clinical courses is an understanding of optimal movement. So this is, evolution through testing and trial has figured out that this is the best way to move. Well, when you get into sports, Olympic weightlifting, now you're basically having to think, we have to maximize performance. And it's very easy to be short-sighted and say, okay, I'm going to do this because right now it worked better. Or, butt back, chest up is the greatest thing. An extension compression stabilizing strategy is way faster in the short term. So that the line I always say in the course is it produces short-term results with long-term consequences. And with the DNS strength training material that you guys, of course, are using every single day at Project Lift, you're thinking like, okay, I'm not just trying to get them to lift heavier. I'm trying to get them to move well in whatever environment their sport demands. In your case, it's Olympic weightlifting. And so the trajectory is a lot longer there. You're thinking, years down the road, because the goal is to get them to move better. It's not, well, what can I do right now in this lift to get them to lift more now? You're always thinking, okay, I want Francesca Duncan to be lifting really, really heavy totals and placing at nationals and, maybe even making some teams. So we need to get her moving the best way possible. And the best way possible is the way that, we describe in those DNS strength training classes.
Yeah.
So that's really neat. So it's been just an amazing process. I'll thank you guys for coming on here, because the strength training classes, where it all started was literally, I guess technically when I first saw, Alana teaching, intra-abdominal pressure on the diaphragm, tinkering with it myself. But like in clinic, I was sort of using it, but then walking you guys through that, before I was even an instructor. So if I started, Drew's hip was 14, right around the same time that year, they asked me to come on and be an instructor, but it wasn't until 16 that I did a presentation to the DNS team about strength training. And it was like, look, we can't be telling elite athletes that all they need is like a 3-month position in a yellow TheraBand and that's somehow going to help them squat, 600 pounds or something like that. But it was really going through that process with you guys. And when the evolution of the actual course, it started as DNS weightlifting, 2 different words, not one word. We changed it to strength training because even though we all know the difference between weightlifting and weightlifting, it was a little bit confusing. But originally it was essentially just the exercise classes, which are sort of watered down versions of the clinical classes where you learn the developmental positions and a lot of the basic stuff. But then over, the next 8 years, strength training just sort of peeled off into its own thing. So now we only use our hands for one test, seated diaphragm test, and we use the hands to really workshop how do you teach someone to brace correctly. Other than that, the hands need to be sort of breaking any ties. So if you're not sure with your eyes when you're watching a test, you shouldn't put your hands on them. Sorry, if you're not sure, then you would do that to sort of confirm it. And then with the cueing, you do a little bit of tactile cueing and that's it. The rest of the stuff, unlike the clinical classes, which are very manual based, and even unlike the exercise classes that are more rehab based. So if you take the exercise classes to learn more about the developmental positions, but then that's all doing sort of the rehab exercise that you would get. The strength training class, there's so much material on there, like where do you breathe and when, brace in the lifting thing? Okay, well, we have to talk about that. What about the diaphragm where your heart rate is elevated, but you still have to brace? Okay, that's a whole other topic. Functional capacity, all these other things. There's so much material that I had to add in there in applying these principles to weightlifting and strength training in general that they just peeled off and they're their own thing. So now we have a whole list of tests, many of which are not taught in the clinical or the exercise classes because they fit with the strength training coaches. And the whole idea was like, I want these classes to be good enough to where knowledgeable strength coaches like yourselves, you need to be able to use this. And there's a lot of stuff in the exercise and the clinical classes that just wouldn't be applicable. And so now the strength training classes are completely different projects where you have a strength training 1, 2, and 3, ultimately ending where we started, which was, can you do an assessment, prescribe the appropriate corrective exercises, and then modify the cueing and the programming so that they can be able to express these patterns, these optimal movement strategies in whatever environment their sport demands. So that's kind of like the full arc of the class. And what's neat is that you guys were not only there in the very beginnings when I was doing this, but then you also went through the strength training classes. So maybe just the final thing, talk about the strength training classes, because you've seen every possible angle of this material. No one else has been front row to this like you guys have. And you actually got to go through and see the final version of the strength training classes that I just finished. You guys just got certified last November. So we'll just finish with like, what did you guys think about the DNS strength training classes? What did you like about them? How have you used them?
Yeah. So, I mean, starting off for me, I went through the exercise series in DNS first and then got to go through the strength training. Just like you said, the exercises are kind of watered down of the clinical. From a strength coach, someone working in the gym, working with athletes, the strength training classes make them absolutely accessible and immediately usable. Like going through the exercise class, like it really required, and thank goodness I had you as a mentor, going like, okay, well, how do I take that to a squat? Or, okay, how do I, take that into the gym? And, there was learning together. So the system that you put together around the assessment, being able to, make the correction and then prescribe the training, it's actionable.
Yeah.
And that right there has been really good. And, it's as we've been doing more of it, my coaches, are literally asking me like, hey, how can I get in? I have other athletes who coach as well, asking me about it, so like you see how quickly and how immediate the transition is. And to the point that even my, those that haven't gone through it are going like, hey, like, what's going on here? Yeah. So, it's been phenomenal. Granted, we've been working together before those courses came together. So like it's already shaped how we coach. It's one of those things, again, I think about a lot is like, what changed my coaching was an athlete didn't need to go through what I went through. So why would I take them through, just the classical way? Why not go into this? Yeah. One thing you say in strength training one that I just love is, as a coach, are we thinking about the future for them, right? If you're a high school coach, are you thinking about college? Are you thinking about when they're in 30, trying to pick their kid up? And you're a collegiate coach, are you thinking about their professional career? Or,
probably not
a career or something, right? And that's one thing I see in a lot of coaches. It's like, hey, I want to get them to this level. And, but there's more of this, like, I don't know, this aim of the immediacy and how it relates. And I get it. And at the same time, like looking in the future, if you develop their foundation, they're going to be better athletes overall. And one thing I said to an athlete the other day that they really said stuck with them was, so many individuals in weightlifting want to train in a high performance way who haven't earned high performance.
Yeah.
They have no foundation for it. And now you're going to go internally rotate your shoulder when you couldn't hold weight above your head normally in a good way.
Yeah.
Right? Like, get out of here. So, the strength training.
But you don't have to compromise the performance. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So the DNS strength training classes are essentially, instead of telling someone you shouldn't be doing that, it's like, well, let's get you to do those things. Let's get you to, clean 1.5 times body weight or snatch body weight or whatever the goal is, in the safest way possible. So it's not like that you're like, we're choosing, okay, well, let's just do rehab in the weight room and tell you that lifting heavy is bad for you. It's like, no, let's maximize your ability to do this safely so that you can perform at your best level.
For as long as you want to do this too.
Yeah. What about you took the strength training class? What about you, Chels?
I mean, to echo what Drew said, like the implicate, like how quickly you can just apply it in. Like there was so many things coming out of 1, coming out of 2, coming out of 3. It was like in the gym the next day, I'm working with athletes. I'm texting them like during the meet or during the course to be like, hey, you had talked about this, like try this, and this, and like, let me know, like truly like in the moment taking action on it. Like if you're a strength trainer or a strength coach of any type, working with athletes of any type, like absolutely necessary to do if you're wanting to truly do the best for your athletes, like hold them, like help them be the best body that they can be, the best mindset for as long as they can, like absolutely essential for them to go down this route.
Yeah, it's been really cool because it's been a huge change taking, what was rehab approach that started in the Motol hospital in the Czech Republic in Prague. That's a clinical class. And then instead of looking at that like a clinical approach, seeing Pavel's teachings as, principles of movement and taking those and then applying them to strength training. And so now the strength training classes, they're not a rehab class. Now they're great classes if you are a rehab specialist, like a chiro or PT that wants to work with athletes, that especially if they're doing weightlifting, but it's a training class. We're teaching like max bracing and all that kind of stuff so that someone like you guys, or even maybe even better, like someone that has not had, 10 years of experience sort of playing around with this, they can walk in, take the 3 classes, and after every class, they can immediately apply this stuff.
Yeah.
So glad you guys came out for this. This is super awesome.
Thanks for having us.
I honestly, I mean this genuine, I've told you this a 1,000 times, but like, it would not have been possible to do this without you guys. We've had lots of conversations about this. We've worked through injuries together. And then also I've learned a lot from you guys going into the gym and seeing, Chelsea, you just sent me Francesca's stuff that's going to be in Strength Training 3 now, showing how you're using DNS concepts with elite national level weightlifters. And you gave me a sort of like a 12 weeks out thing, and then you gave me like the 2 weeks out, like how you're actually doing this. So I've learned a lot from you guys, and it's always just a source of joy when I walk in there and I see somebody doing, a bear position, or, you're doing a breakout with someone, you got them against the wall in a supported 3 months and you're doing that. So it's just been like just awesome watching the evolution of it, because you guys have taken it and run with it and applied your own things and added lots to it. So, it's project-lift.org. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I can't recommend them higher. I'll look at the camera for this one. So both personally as humans, I know that doesn't necessarily matter to a lot of people, but they're wonderful people. They do great coaching. And so if you want to check them out, www.project-lift.org. They've got lots of good information on there. And what I love about it is it's supporting great people, but it's also supporting great stuff. So you guys are putting out really, really good stuff. So if you'd like to learn more about the DNS strength training stuff, obviously take the DNS strength training courses. But if you'd like to see how the strength training stuff can be applied, at the high level in Olympic weightlifting, then I don't know a better place to go than these guys. So awesome. Thank you so much for coming out. We'll have to do this again later on. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.